very fragile thing and can easily be jacked, right? Of course, telling lies, this is another major message. A heavy burden. You'll remember that we made this observation that in Dante's hell, the only real sin is to forget. That is to say, to not remember who one is and what one is supposed to be doing. But maybe another way to say this is the worst lies are the lies one tells oneself. That is to say, self-hypocrisy, self-delusion. Of course, when we get to Shakespeare, we're going to see this game played out a lot. In his Macbeth, for example, Duncan will say, "There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face." Lady Macbeth will say to her man, Macbeth, "Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." Shakespeare will love this notion of showing the hypocrisy. Our classic exemplar is, of course, Iago in the great text, Othello. The symbolism at 2b, the heavy robes, obviously, and the guilt of hypocrisy. In other words, they look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside they're corrupt. At 2b, the irony involved, well, obviously, painted people is a great line, right? It's hard to see the hypocrite because the hypocrite looks so authentic, we might say. You'll remember maybe in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus Christ said about the very Pharisees that were being referenced here, that on the outside they're beautiful, but they're like tombs on the outside, beautiful sepulchres, but in the inside they have disgusting bones in Matthew 23. Similar kind of idea. The other irony here is that Virgil trusted demons. He can't believe that they actually lied to him, and that makes him mad. Like he's mad he got duped, if you will. Dante is poet. Well, think about this. He creates fun characters, doesn't he? Especially with Virgil. He gives a little bit more tweaking to each time to each one of these characters. We're going to see this game played out again in the next canto, in Canto 24, when Dante will have had enough and he'll sit down. He'll be ready to finish. And, of course, Virgil will speak for 303, the most famous lines of all of Dante's Inferno, "Up on your feet. This is no time to tire." Dante as politician. Well, notice what happens when you put Guelph and Ghibelline together in an attempt to try and create peace. No lasting peace. Why? Because of Pope Clement IV, again a religious figure in power who is able to somehow keep these factions from getting on. Philosopher, theologian Dante. Well, it's interesting because it does kind of seem like we're playing the scapegoat game here, blaming the Jews and Caiaphas for the crucifixion of Christ. And, of course, following in the kind of trajectory that many theologians have read the book of John as, that attempt to try and, you got to blame somebody. Why not blame, in this case, the Jews? And you get a sense that maybe Dante's struggling a little bit with the ways that he's going to do that. At 3a, well, think of it. Homer and Virgil both used some kind of notion of the bad guy to blame the violence that was inherent to this text. In other words, it's not our fault, it's somebody else's fault. We're not really attacking Troy because we want their women and their gold. It's because Paris took away Helen, etc., right? You'll even remember Aeneas in the Aeneid made the argument that he was the nice guy, the good guy in all this, and Turnus was the bad guy, and of course all Turnus was doing was defending what he thought was his, right? How about this one? Do you remember this line from the Iliad? And I told you we would come back to this line several times. From Iliad 9, 378. You'll remember. Odysseus and his pals, Ajax and Phoenix, are coming to try and talk Achilles into coming back, sent by Agamemnon, you'll remember. And you remember early on, in Canto 9, line 378, what Achilles said to Odysseus about the thing he hates the most? That man who says one thing, but keeps another in his heart. That is to say, for Achilles, the thing I hate the most are hypocrites. Of course, Odysseus, as we said back then, is the grand example. Don't worry, we're going to get to Ulysses here in a little bit and why he ends up here. But notice that dichotomy, right, that continues to surface. We long for people to tell us the truth. It's hard for us to sometimes pick out the hypocrites. Remember what Machiavelli said in his Prince. The best leaders are the ones who can look right at you and lie. The greatest leaders are hypocrites. We do not want leaders that are truthful. We want leaders that can manipulate the truth. Well, we've already mentioned Iago, obviously, as Othello's maybe most disturbing. Honest Iago is what Othello keeps calling him, and yet an unbelievable hypocrite, right? At 3b, well, we have to ask this question because we're here. What was a time when you were acted as a hypocrite and you got away with it? What was a time when you were a hypocrite and you got called out for it? How'd that work? What was a time that you trusted a liar, right? And then you were shocked afterwards, kind of like Virgil. What? You lied to me? I can't believe it. But looking back on it, you're like, well, I guess I should have known. I mean, that individual does gossip or lies or is a hypocrite a lot. Do you think it's true, last 3B question, do you think it's true that the worst lies are the ones we tell ourselves? Well, that's Canto 23. We now move on to Canto 24 and pouch number 7 and the thieves. And we're going to have Dante, who's about had it. Okay, think of it. At Canto 24, you're 10 cantos away from this thing being finished. And for those of you who have been working through every one of these cantos, you're like, yes, finally, the last 10 cantos. This thing goes on forever. Yeah, it's kind of intended to go on forever, and you're supposed to get fatigued as you work through it. Finally, by Canto 24, Pilgrim Dante has had enough, and Virgil will say, up on your feet. We'll go to work with those lines next. Thank you.